It was a warm evening in Birmingham, Alabama. The streetlights had just turned on, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalks. Malik, Jalen, and DeAndre were walking home from Jackson Heights High School, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, their shirts still damp with sweat from basketball practice. They were chatting, Jalen cracking jokes, Malik talking about a great play, and DeAndre shaking his head over a missed shot. The road they took home was quiet at this time of night. A few cars passed by. A distant horn echoed through the air. As they turned a corner near Highway 280, something caught Malik's attention. A sleek, jet-black Rolls-Royce Phantom sat parked on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking. Even under the dim glow of the streetlights, the car looked expensive, the kind you only see in music videos, or parked outside five-star hotels. But something was wrong. The driver, an older man dressed in a navy blue suit, crisp white shirt underneath, stood beside the car, struggling with a jack. His gold cufflinks caught the light, but his face was twisted in frustration. His polished shoes slipped against the pavement as he tried to position the jack under the car. The front right tire, completely flat. Jalen let out a low whistle. Man, that car must cost at least $500,000. DeAndre chuckled. Look at him. Bet he's never changed a tire in his life. They could have just kept walking. It wasn't their problem. But Malik stopped. Hey, we should help him. Jalen raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Malik nodded. The guy's struggling. Wouldn't you want someone to stop if it was your granddad? DeAndre sighed. All right, let's do it. They crossed the street, stepping up to the man. At first, he barely noticed them. Up close, they could see the frustration in his face, sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cool night air. His fingers fumbled with the jack's handle, and his Rolex gleamed under the streetlights. Malik spoke first. Need some help, sir? The man looked up, startled. His sharp gray-blue eyes flickered between them, scanning their faces. For a moment, it seemed like he wasn't sure whether to trust them. Then, with a tight sigh, he stepped back. You boys know how to do this? Jalen grinned. Yeah, we got you. Malik crouched down, adjusting the jack. This thing's all wrong, he muttered. You gotta set it against the frame here, or you're just lifting air. DeAndre was already loosening the lug nuts. The man watched as they worked, quick, efficient, like they had done this 100 times before. Within minutes, the flat tire was off. Jalen rolled the spare into place. The man shook his head, almost in disbelief. You boys are something else. But the way he said it didn't sound disrespectful. There was real admiration in his voice. As Jalen tightened the last bolt, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of crisp $100 bills. For your help, he said, holding it out to them. Malik glanced at the money, then shook his head. No, we're good. We just help when we can. The man's expression shifted slightly, as if something had just clicked in his mind. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly slid the money back into his pocket. His eyes stayed on them a little longer, his face hard to read. Then, with a small nod of appreciation, he stepped into his car, started the engine, and drove away, disappearing into the night. Jalen let out a breath, rubbing his hands together. Man, we could have made some serious money just now. DeAndre laughed. Nah, that guy was weird. He looked at us like he was figuring something out. Malik shrugged. Whatever. We did the right thing. That's what matters. But the way that man looked at them, it stayed in Malik's mind. The next morning felt like any other. The halls of Jackson Heights High School buzzed with students shuffling between classes, sneakers squeaking on the floors, the smell of cafeteria breakfast, overcooked eggs, and syrup-drenched pancakes lingered in the air. Malik, Jalen, and DeAndre stood in their usual spot near the lockers, joking about last night's game. Jalen was mid-story about a failed crossover move when the school's PA system crackled to life. Malik Bennett, Jalen Thomas, DeAndre Williams, please report to the principal's office immediately. Silence. The noise in the hallway dropped. Heads turned their way. Jalen frowned. What did we do now? Malik shrugged. I don't know. Did you all do your homework? DeAndre groaned. Man, I knew I should have turned in that history assignment. But something felt off. When students got called like that, it usually meant trouble. A fight, a suspension, or, worst of all, a cop waiting in the office. None of them had done anything wrong, but their stomachs tightened as they walked down the hall. The secretary barely glanced up when they entered. Go on in, she said, motioning toward the principal's office. They stepped inside. Behind the desk sat Principal Roger Whitmore, a man known for his strict rules and sharp suits, but he wasn't alone. Sitting across from him was the man from last night, the billionaire. But today, he did not look like a stranded driver. He looked powerful, the kind of man who could walk into a room and own it without saying a word. His suit, even sharper than before, deep charcoal, silk pocket square. His posture, calm, commanding. Jalen blinked. Yo, is that... Before he could finish, the man spoke. His voice was smooth, controlled. Have a seat, gentlemen. They hesitated, before sitting in the chairs in front of him. Principal Whitmore folded his hands. His usual serious expression was replaced with something more curious. The man leaned forward slightly. I assume you remember me, DeAndre scoffed. Kinda hard to forget a guy driving a $500,000 car in the middle of nowhere. The man gave a small smile. That was quite the moment. You didn't have to stop, but you did. He glanced at each of them. And you refused my money. He paused, watching their reactions. Malik felt an odd tension in the room, as if they were being tested. Then the man reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek black business card, and slid it across the desk. My name is Lawrence Whitaker. Silence. Jalen raised an eyebrow. Is that supposed to mean something to us? Principal Whitmore cleared his throat. Mr. Whitaker is... Well, let's just say he's a very powerful man. Malik picked up the card. The gold lettering shimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights. Whitaker Industries. CEO. Whitaker tapped his fingers against the desk. I built my company from scratch. Real estate, tech, investments. You name it. I know talent when I see it. And last night, I saw 3 young men with integrity. DeAndre crossed his arms. Okay, and... Whitaker's smile did not fade. And I have an offer for you. Jalen leaned back in his chair. A job? Man, we're still in high school. Whitaker chuckled. Not a job, an opportunity. His gaze sharpened. I want to see how you handle real pressure. Are you up for it? Malik hesitated. This felt too good to be true. Whitaker pulled out another card and placed it on the desk. An address. A time. Meet me there after school, he said, if you're interested. Then, he stood, adjusted his cuffs, and walked out, like he owned the room. The space felt different once he was gone. Principal Whitmore let out a slow breath. I have no idea what that was about, he admitted, but whatever it is, it's big. The boys exchanged glances. What exactly had they just gotten themselves into? The rest of the school day felt like it would never end. Classes blurred together, notes were written, but none of them were really paying attention. The only thing on their minds was that black business card sitting in Malik's pocket. By the time the final bell rang, Jalen was the first to break the silence. So, are we really going to go to this? DeAndre let out a deep breath, rubbing the back of his head. Man, I don't know. Some rich guy shows up out of nowhere, acts all mysterious, and now he wants to test us? Sounds like a setup. Malik stayed quiet for a moment. He felt it too. The tension, the risk, but also the curiosity. He pulled the card out again, staring at the gold lettering. An address, 5 p.m. No explanation, no details. After a pause, he slid it back into his pocket. We at least check it out. If it feels shady, we leave. Jalen sighed. All right, but if we get kidnapped, just remember, I called it. 4:58 p.m. The address led them to a downtown office building. Not flashy, but the kind where real business happened. The kind of place where billionaires moved money, made deals, and changed lives with a single signature. A tall glass entrance, sleek black doors. A security guard stood out front, but he barely glanced at them as they walked in. Inside, the lobby was marble and dead silent, so quiet that the sound of their sneakers against the floor felt out of place. A receptionist, dressed in a gray suit, looked up from her desk. She barely reacted. They're expecting you. She nodded toward an elevator, with no buttons. Just a sleek black card reader. A single beep. The doors slid open. Jalen glanced at the others. Yeah, this does not feel normal. But there was no turning back now. They stepped inside. This wasn't a normal elevator. No jerky movements, no floor numbers, just smooth, silent motion. By the time the doors opened, Malik had no idea how many floors they had gone up, but what waited for them was even stranger. A massive conference room, bigger than any classroom they had ever been in. A long glass table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the city skyline. At the far end of the table, Lawrence Whitaker sat, waiting, and he wasn't alone. Beside him sat two men and a woman, dressed just as sharp. Expressions unreadable, but something about them felt important. Whitaker gestured to the seats across from him. Have a seat, gentlemen. They sat. Whitaker leaned back. His gray-blue eyes studied them carefully. Ever heard the phrase, pressure makes diamonds? Malik nodded, slowly. Whitaker's sharp gaze moved between them. I don't believe in luck. I believe in preparation, seeing opportunities before they appear. He let the words settle. Last night, you had a choice. Keep walking, or stop and help. His voice was calm, steady. You made the right choice. A pause. Then, now. I want to see if that decision-making holds up when the stakes are higher. DeAndre frowned. What kind of stakes? Whitaker tapped the table twice. The woman beside him slid a folder across. Malik hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a name, an address, and instructions. Jalen squinted at the page. Wait, what is this? Whitaker's smile was calm. A test. The air in the room shifted. He folded his hands together. You'll go to this location, follow the instructions exactly, and report back. DeAndre shook his head. Hold up, so we're running errands for a billionaire now? Whitaker chuckled. If it were that simple, I wouldn't have called you here. He leaned in slightly. This is about trust, decision-making. Risk Jalen exhaled. And if we say no? Whitaker didn't blink. Then you walk away, no hard feelings. Silence. Malik's fingers tightened around the folder. This was crazy. Nothing about this felt normal. But at the same time, it felt like a door had been cracked open. A door most people would never even see. DeAndre drummed his fingers on the table. So, if we do this, and we pass, what happens then? Whitaker's smile barely changed, but something in his expression did. Then, gentlemen, you'll find out what it really means to have power. The test was waiting, but none of them were ready for what it would cost. Inside the folder, there was only a name, Elliot Grayson. An address. On the south side of Birmingham. No instructions, no explanation. Just a time, 7:30 p.m. As they stepped out of the building, Jalen frowned, his voice low. This got bad idea written all over it. DeAndre checked his phone. 6:12 p.m. What's the move? We going? Malik stayed quiet. Something about Whitaker's test felt off. But it was more than just curiosity pulling him forward. It was the feeling that they were already in too deep to turn back now. He exhaled. We check it out, but if it feels wrong, we leave. They dapped up, locked in. 7:29 p.m. The address led them to a small, run-down corner store in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The flickering sign above the entrance read, Grayson's Market, but the missing O made it look like even the sign had given up. The sidewalk was cracked. A few kids played basketball with a half-flat ball, their sneakers scraping against the pavement. A man in a worn-out hoodie leaned against the store entrance, smoking a cigarette. His eyes flicked toward them, but he said nothing. Jalen muttered under his breath. This some mob movie setup, man? I swear Malik ignored him and stepped inside first. The store was dimly lit. Shelves, half-stocked. Behind the counter, a man counted a stack of bills, the old cash register clanking with each movement. His name tag read, Elliot, late 50s, hair graying at the edges, his face lined with exhaustion, the kind that came from a life of battles, not celebrations. His hands, rough, calloused but steady, froze when he noticed them. His narrowed eyes scanned their faces. You, Whitaker's people? DeAndre tensed. I don't know if we'd call it that, but yeah. Elliot studied them for a second. Then, without a word, he reached under the counter. Jalen took a step back. Yo, what's he reaching for? Elliot pulled out a small box, taped shut, and set it on the counter. His gaze stayed on them. Take this to the address on the bottom. You don't open it. You don't ask questions. Malik picked up the box. It was light, but firm, like whatever was inside had weight to it. His stomach tightened. DeAndre stepped forward. What's in it? Elliot didn't blink. You didn't ask Whitaker that before coming here. Don't start now. Silence. Then Elliot sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. His voice dropped lower. Listen, if you have any doubts, leave it. Walk out. Don't look back. The boys exchanged glances. DeAndre crossed his arms. That sound like a warning, old man? Elliot didn't smile. That sounds like the only advice you'll get. Outside, the box in Malik's hands felt heavier than it should have. The streetlights flickered above them. The city hummed in the background. Jalen shook his head. Nah, I don't like this. What if it's something illegal? DeAndre frowned. And what if it's not? What if this is some crazy test Whitaker set up? Malik's eyes locked onto the address. Scrawled in red marker on the bottom of the box, 315 West Fairfield Avenue. His gut twisted. Jalen huffed. Man, we don't even know this Whitaker guy. So that's it? We just start moving packages for some billionaire? DeAndre shot back. And what if this leads to something bigger? Malik closed his eyes for a second, the weight of the moment pressing down. Finally, he opened them. He looked at both of them. We're not taking it. Silence. Jalen let out a deep breath of relief. Thank God. DeAndre hesitated. You sure? This could have been our shot. Malik nodded. If this is a test, it's not just about following orders. It's about knowing when to say no. He turned toward the store. Elliot was still standing in the doorway, watching, without a word. Malik set the box down on the curb and walked away. Jalen and DeAndre followed. Elliot smiled. They had passed, but they wouldn't understand why until later. The walk home was quiet. No jokes, no trash talk, just the sound of sneakers scuffing against the pavement. Jalen finally exhaled. That was weird, right? Like, real weird. Malik nodded, still processing. DeAndre kicked a loose rock down the sidewalk, his shoulders tense. If that was a test, what was the point? Just to see if we'd do it? Before they could figure it out, a black car pulled up beside them. Not the Rolls-Royce from the first night. Something different. Sleek, expensive, tinted windows. That didn't roll down. Jalen took a step back. Nope. Nah, I don't do movies where people get snatched. The back door opened. And then Lawrence Whitaker stepped out, same sharp charcoal suit. But this time, his expression was different. Not amused, not testing, serious, calculated. Malik squared his shoulders. You already know our answer. Whitaker's eyes flicked toward the box, still sitting untouched on the curb outside Elliot's store. He let out a slow breath. Interesting. DeAndre crossed his arms. So, we failed your little game. Whitaker shook his head. You passed. Silence. Jalen blinked. What? Whitaker adjusted his cuffs. That box had nothing in it. Malik's jaw tightened. Then why send us? Whitaker studied them, his expression unreadable. Because most people don't ask questions when money is on the line. You walked away. That's rare. Jalen let out a dry laugh. So, we passed by, not doing anything. Whitaker smirked. You passed by, proving you don't let the promise of opportunity blind you. His tone shifted, turning serious. Integrity is rare. I had to see if you had it. Malik exhaled. It wasn't about delivering the package. It was about whether they'd blindly follow orders, or think for themselves. Whitaker slid his hands into his pockets. You boys ever heard of the 1% rule? DeAndre raised an eyebrow. You mean, like, rich people? Whitaker shook his head. Number. The 1% rule is about mindset. In any situation, only 1% of people think differently than the rest. The other 99%. He stepped closer. They follow. No questions. No hesitation. His voice lowered. I don't invest in followers. I invest in the 1%. Malik's stomach tightened. This wasn't about a job. It was about something bigger. Jalen squinted. So what? You're just out here scouting kids on the street? Whitaker smiled. I'm out here looking for people who can handle the pressure. People who won't fold when the stakes get real. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another business card. This one was heavier, embossed with a private number. He held it out to Malik. When you're ready to learn what real power looks like, call me. Then, without another word, he stepped back into the car, the door shut, the engine purred, and, just like that, he was gone. The street was quiet again. The card in Malik's hand felt heavier than it should have. The three of them just stood there, under the buzzing streetlights. DeAndre finally spoke. So, what do we do? Jalen scoffed. Man, I say we throw that thing in a sewer drain and keep moving. Malik stared at the card, his mind racing. This wasn't just a test. This was a door opening, a door most people wouldn't even know existed. The real question was, did they want to walk through it? Jalen exhaled. Whatever we decide, we do it together. Malik nodded and slipped the card into his pocket. The test was over. But the real challenge, it was just beginning. Dear listeners, power is not just about money or status. It's about choices. Some people chase every opportunity without questioning it. Others stop, think, and make the tough call, even if it means walking away. Real power? It's knowing when to say no. Would you have passed Whitaker's test? If you had the chance to change your life, but it came with a risk. Would you take it? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe.